My guest today is Keone Hon. Keone is the co-founder and CEO of Monad, an EVM-compatible layer one that can process, I believe, 10,000 transactions per second. Reasonably impressive. Welcome to the show, Keone.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Andy.
Hey, it is a pleasure. Let's do what we do at the beginning of the show, Keone. It'd be great if you could please introduce yourself. Love to hear just a little bit about your professional backstory and your journey, because I've had a look. It's an interesting one, and I think it probably informs what you're doing now. So yeah, let's jump in. Please go ahead.
Sure thing. My name's Keone. Uh, After college, I worked in the high frequency trading industry for about 10 years. And I guess more specifically, I worked at a company called Jump Trading for about 8 years before starting Monad with two other co-founders. I was on the HFT side, so doing a mix of machine learning and price prediction and building high performance trading systems, which was definitely somewhat relevant to the work that we do at Monad now, where we're building really high performant EVM execution system and then building that into a new layer one. But yeah, I'm happy to, dig in more if you're curious or just talk more about Monad or anything else you'd like to chat about.
Yeah, well, I think we'll do all of the above, Keone. But let's start at Jump. I mean, anyone that is reasonably serious about crypto trading or spends too much time on crypto Twitter, even they will be familiar with Jump Trading as a brand. So to start with, maybe just be fun to get some general reflections of your time at Jump, and then perhaps I'm sure some of those experiences have informed the origin story for Monad, or what you're trying to achieve with Monad, right?
Mm, certainly. I joined Jump in the end of 2013. Jump Trading is a company that is pretty successful in the algorithmic trading space. Almost all just systematic trading, uh, writing programs that take market data and convert that into price predictions, and then convert that into a set of orders to be sent to the market. My team specifically was focused on futures trading, and without disclosing the exact numbers, I would say we're definitely a major player in a number of different markets. And that was a good experience because these are very competitive markets. There's pretty, you know, uh, there's a bunch of exchanges and probably thousands of different products, and anyone can set up a server near the exchange and start parsing market data and then figure out how to send orders and come up with better strategies. So it is kind of a competitive space where you're competing both to predict very accurately, and then ties between predictions are broken by who can be the fastest. So there's definitely a competitive pressure that is pushing everyone toward being really, really performant um, on the order of microseconds. So it was a good experience, learned a lot, worked with a pretty small team, about 10 people. We were responsible for building the entire trading stack. And that was a good experience for just working in a small team to build something, I think, fairly ambitious.
And I saw a Keone that just recently you tweeted. I'm not sure what it was called, but you tweeted about a recent high frequency trading study or thesis. You familiar with what I'm referencing? And maybe just run us through your comments on that, because I think you thought it was quite an interesting thesis, but it didn't necessarily prove its conclusion one way or the other, I think you said.
Oh, sure. I think I just tweeted that all academic papers about high frequency trading are incorrect.
Yeah.
And then people were commenting and sort of saying the obvious comment, which is like, well, of course, no one would publish anything that works, because if they did, there would not be an incentive to publish. And I think that's a fair statement, but I think it also goes a little bit beyond that, which is that it's also really hard to know whether something is going to work up front. And there's a lot of assumptions that one frequently makes when doing an academic study. Like you assume that there's a certain cost of execution, or your trades will have a certain amount of slippage or market impact. You have to make assumptions about fees. You have to make assumptions about latencies. And there's a lot of stuff in there that has a huge effect on the actual expected value of one of these strategies. And the margin for error is just very, very low, because for strategies that have pretty high turnover, the expected value in basis points of each trade is just minuscule, like single digit basis points or less. So if you have something that is biased, like an assumption about latency that's wrong, and then that could have a massive effect on whether that strategy is actually profitable. So I think the more meta comment that I have is just that because these strategies are so sensitive, the only way to really know is to go out there and do it and build the actual strategy, build the actual prediction stack and the actual mechanical thing that goes out and does the thing that your idea is, and then see if it's profitable. And there's a lot of things that we would simulate that looked profitable, but then when you run it, it just wasn't. So not to say it's totally trial and error, but it's more like there's a lot of ways to be tripped up and to take a negative result and have it seem positive in simulations. So having, a lot of academic papers, it's really hard for them to not to actually try it. So they just write a paper about something that probably won't actually work.
Yeah, you've got to have skin in the game. You've got to be the man in the arena. You've got to be testing it in real world adversarial conditions. That's what
Right.
trading. That's what trading is, Keone. Well, you know that better than most. And look, if that's the case, why you're part of this? Let's say you're part of an elite high frequency trading team at Jump. That look, there's a lot of pressure to be performant, as you said, but I'm sure it's professionally fulfilling as well. It'd be intense, but good times. What made you decide that you're going to move on from that kind of environment and kind of put yourself even more so to be, the man in the arena, or the small team back in the arena, trying to essentially spin up a new kind of startup, 0 to 1, go through that whole headache again, and try and build a new high performance blockchain, I suppose. What fostered, what was the beginning of that decision?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of major factors. One is that although our team had a lot of success over the years in building really performant systems, it is somewhat of a situation of diminishing marginal returns where, you're putting in a ton of effort to make a very small latency improvement, tweaking things very slightly, which might require a ton of reorganization, re-architecture of the system just to make a tiny change. And then, as time goes on, that just becomes even more and more extreme. So I think that's a first factor, is just seeing that over time, it really is a race to zero. And at some point, you should probably exit a race that is a race to zero. But I think another thing is that we were just doing work that was very proprietary, pushing to a GitHub repo that like 10 people had access to. And we were using open source tools in some cases, and excited about open source development, building in the open, building for a much broader set of people. And then as our team became more familiar with crypto, and particularly as my co-founder James and I became more aware of DeFi and the idea of open finance, permissionless, composable applications that anyone can build and deploy. People can build new things on top of existing things. That became very exciting, and it was very clear also that there was still a very big need to deliver much more performant systems specifically for the Ethereum virtual machine compared to what existed at the time, and continues to not exist right now. So I think that's it's a confluence of a couple of different factors, but at the end of the day, for any startup, you need an idea that you have very high conviction in, where you feel it's something that's really needed. The market is demanding it, and also that you have relevant skills where you're capable of tackling that. If anyone is capable of it, we felt that we were. So all of those things together really made it a good fit.
Well, tell us a little bit more about why you think that is, or what that means then, Keone. So, you described Monad as an ultra high performance EVM blockchain that potentially 1000x's the throughput of Ethereum. I don't know if that comes from a press release or your website or somewhere, but that is in my notes. Look, we do hear that kind of what do you call it, marketing copy. I don't know, people say this all the time. Some people can deliver and some can't. Like, I'm not saying I doubt your claims, but just tell us a little bit about why you and your team are the team to pull this off.
Right. Yeah, I think the backdrop of all of this is that the Ethereum virtual machine bytecode standard is similar to JavaScript in the early 2000s, where
Mm.
it's kind of had become the dominant standard. A lot of people were building applications and libraries there, but the actual performance of JavaScript was really quite poor. And we're in the same environment now where almost all apps are built for EVM. They're built in Solidity or in some limited cases in Viper or Huff, which are other high-level languages that compile to EVM bytecode. But the actual systems are just not that performant. And I think a lot of there's a lot of interesting research going on in the space, but a lot of it is in other directions, like thinking about how to scale rollups, research into zero knowledge proofs, research into shared sequencers, research into restaking. And we think we're excited about all those verticals as well in the Ethereum space, but no one is doing what we're doing, which is rebuilding the EVM execution stack from the ground up. Um, and I guess that might sound surprising, but that's just the state of the world right now. What really needs to be done is the systems need to introduce pipelining into many different areas of execution. Pipelining at the transaction level so that transactions can be run in parallel when transactions don't collide with each other. Additionally, there needs to be pipelining at the state access layer, which is how, whenever a smart contract is run, it almost always depends on some state associated with that smart contract. That means a disk read. And then after the transaction completes, it's a disk write. So that state access is really inefficient right now because it's just done in a fairly sequential manner. And then there also needs to be pipelining between execution and consensus. So I can describe that a little bit more, but I think at a high level, pipelining is the act of trying to utilize all of the resources of the system efficiently by doing work in parallel and scheduling work appropriately. And existing systems really don't have this notion of pipelining, or at least certainly not to the extent that's needed. And that's a lot of what we do at Monad is introducing pipelining to the Ethereum virtual machine so that it can be a lot more performant, so that we can go from 10 transactions per second to 10,000 transactions per second.
Yeah, so I mean, we're getting a little bit technical, Keone, which is absolutely fine. So when you use the term pipelining, we've talked about, or people will be familiar with the various different methods, I suppose, that different builders across the Ethereum community, different paths that people are taking, roll-ups, side chains, sharding,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera, et cetera. So are you kind of saying that pipelining is the path that you and your team are pursuing, and that this is potentially a different solution and maybe a better solution to achieve those kind of transaction speeds?
Right. I think it's definitely a completely different vertical in the overall Ethereum scaling landscape. And we're excited about a lot of the other verticals as well, but progress requires focus, and our team is sort of uniquely positioned to address this specific vertical, given our previous background in building high performance execution systems. Whereas other teams that maybe have a lot of cryptography knowledge, or have a lot of knowledge with building proving systems, they might be more suited towards some of the other directions. So I think overall, just there's a lot of different efforts going on that are going to scale Ethereum in different ways, and some of these are composable with each other as well. For example, in the roll-up space, the idea of a roll-up is that it's moving execution off of the main chain onto a separate blockchain, which then has a mechanism to commit data and commit effectively checkpoints of the execution back to the main chain, and thus scale Ethereum by moving some of the work off chain and then just committing like a cheaper thing back on chain. So that's a scaling effort that's going on, and everyone knows about Optimism and Arbitrum and other Base, for example, Coinbase's roll up. And this is one direction, but then a completely orthogonal thing to that is making the individual node that runs those rollups really perform it and making it able to execute. Because at some point, the rollup actually runs into a bottleneck of not being able to execute more than a certain number of transactions, and they could try to throw more hardware at it, or but at the end of the day, there's still limitations. So that's actually a situation where the work that we're doing in Monad of building execution systems that are really performant could potentially meld really well with some of these orthogonal scaling efforts.
Yeah, very nice, Keone. And I understand you have a recent grant program that you announced, and there's a number of verticals involved in that. So maybe just update us on what you're trying to achieve with those grants.
Sure. We're excited about supporting, like at the end of the day, Monad is a base layer blockchain. So it's just a developer platform, and the mission is to help developers build apps productively and reach many, many users without running into impediments from user adoption coming from bad user experience or high gas fees or other impediments that are actually impediments to virality. So our job is really just to support developers, and this grants program is one of many ways that our team is trying to help support developers, especially in the very early stages. We're excited about people who are building DeFi applications. We're excited about people who are thinking about gaming, NFTs, Web3 social, Web3 identity, and just people who are building something ambitious, honestly. People that are building things that solve problems for non-crypto natives at the end of the day.
Yeah, very nice. And I suppose, if we zoom out a bit, Keone, and we think about the broader, wider Ethereum ecosystem, it is really only so next year it will be 10 years really since the publication of the Ethereum white paper. So it's not really, Ethereum hasn't been around all that long. Certainly has in crypto terms, it has, obviously. But in that short decade, shall we say, Ethereum has come a long way. There've been some stumbles along the way. There've been some pivots, and to a certain extent, it's not that different teams and builders are kind of, and Vitalik are making it up as they go, but in some ways, we are, because the jet is in the air, if you like, and we're trying to constantly build bigger and faster engines while the jet is in the air. Does any of that kind of is any of that still a worry at this point?
I think that the best way to build is by getting constant feedback from the market. So I think that the approach of launching something with a longer term roadmap, as Ethereum did, is totally a reasonable thing to do. I mean, there have been a number of pivots, like you said, with initially the plan for Plasma to be the scaling solution, and then um, at some point there was a plan for execution sharding to be the major effort. And it's really only been, I guess, in the past maybe 3 or 4 years that um, rollups became sort of the dominant plan for Ethereum scaling. And then I think about 6 months ago or so, the EF actually acknowledged that execution sharding is no longer really part of the plans, and they're just focused on supporting rollups, and that's like the vision going forward. So I think it's just an anecdote about how you don't really know until you have the system in production and you see like what kinds of things other people are able to build that interface well and figure out what the market wants as well as what the builder community wants. So if it's actually better for Ethereum and anyone building anything to like just try to adapt over time. I also sort of feel that the current plan is not necessarily, you know, like 5 years from now, we may not be looking back on it and being like, oh, exactly, the decision that they made in 2023, like that ended up being the final thing. Like there'll probably be other changes as well. And it comes from a mix of other voices in the room and people showing that there are other approaches that are important. Um, that is actually something I wanted to mention as well, that with Monad, we feel very strongly about just trying to prove out hypotheses that we have and then push improvements back to Ethereum. So in the future, you'll see us proposing things as EIPs and proving out maybe that certain changes make sense, but then um, hoping to have those reflected in Ethereum someday, although it may take quite some time for that to happen, we know. But that's the only way to do it is just to prove it out.
Yeah. What kind of time frame do you guys think about this stuff then, Keone, when we think about the broader Ethereum landscape, I suppose, because you talked about being excited by the vision of DeFi and open finance, and yeah, look, a lot of people are, but we've seen kind of different waves and use cases and sub communities come and go, like NFTs and things like that. And while the promise of open finance and DeFi is incredible. The realistic side of it today is a little bit different with the kind of the technical hurdles that perhaps keep the mainstream users outside of DeFi. Of course, the technical risks and the exploits that happen, and of course the regulatory side as well. That's still a little bit unclear as to how open finance can hope to operate in a kind of seamless global economy when different jurisdictions, different governments have very different views on how all this works. I know these are big topics, Keone, but I guess how do you think about that going forward?
I think the very first thing that has to happen is delivering a better user experience relative to whatever the incumbent is. I think there are other open questions that you mentioned that are factors as well for adoption. But if you're not from the start delivering a better user experience, then it's, nothing else really matters. Like we see cases where Uber, pioneered a new business model that was disruptive to existing incumbents, i.e., taxi drivers, and actually delivered a better user experience. And then people, used that a lot. They benefited from it. They're so happy about it that there was regulatory pressure to allow that to continue to exist. And ultimately they built a new market that ended up, now is commonly used. So I think that really any change has to come from the consumers, but the consumers has to be clamoring for that change because they are actually getting a better user experience. And we are seeing some cases like that already. Like, for example, as a payments method, existing crypto networks are potentially a lot cheaper than using some of the traditional rails, like sending oh gosh, I'm really forget like Western Union. I forgot what the phrase is now. Do you know it?
Remittance.
Okay. Yeah, sending remittance. That wasn't the word I'm thinking of, which is
Okay.
now going to bother me. But yeah, like it's just, instead of, charging like, several percentage points just to send money internationally, if you can send it much more cheaply using cryptocurrency, then that's a better user experience. And then a lot of people are using that. Or if your local currency inflates at 50% a year or something crazy like that, then you actually want a store of value that is not just subject to the policies of the government, which might be very counter to the what's best for the people that are holding the currency, like Argentinian peso. So, we're seeing product market fit with certain crypto products, but to have it go nationwide, to have it go global, we just need to deliver better value. And I think this is a very long-winded way of saying that in a lot of cases with open finance or using DeFi as your personal finance solution, right now that might not be a better user experience. It might not be a better product. It might not be a cheaper product compared to trading on centralized exchanges. So that's the first thing that we have to solve.
Yeah, very well said, Keone. Look, as we start to finish off this part of the podcast, you guys have got some good backers, some people that you're working with.
Yeah.
I think, and you had a seed funding round led by Dragonfly Capital at the start of this year. Placeholder is in there. You got a good team behind you.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're really appreciative of the support of our early backers, and yeah, they've just been really supportive through this bear market, and um, helped us a lot. Very aligned with our vision, and looking forward to continuing to work with them in the future.
Awesome. All right. Well, as I say, as we finish off this part of the podcast, Keone, for anyone who's interested in learning more about what you guys are building at Monad, just please tell them where they should go. And also, look, anything that you guys have in the pipeline, as it were, what are you working on? What is coming down the product pipeline? Anything that you can, tease the listeners with, please do so.
For sure. You can find us on the web by going to monad.xyz. That's monad.xyz. And you can find us on Twitter, where our Twitter username is monad_xyz. And in terms of things coming down the pipeline, the team is hard at work. There's a lot to do, but we will be shipping our DevNet and then a private testnet and public testnet in the months to come. I think probably the next thing to expect is just some docs and a white paper of sorts. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome. Well, stay tuned for that indeed. It'll be fascinating to see how you guys roll this out. It's great to see, really talented teams such as yours, Keone, working at the state of the art of what blockchains can achieve. So can't do anything but wish you the very best of luck with that. Let's go to a very quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll have some fun. We'll run Keone through the very famous crypto conversation hot take round. Back in 1 second. All right, we are back, and I'm with Keone Hon. Keone is the co-founder and CEO at Monad, an EVM-compatible layer 1 that can process 10,000 transactions per second. State-of-the-art blockchain stuff. Great to learn all about it. Keone, I like to finish each podcast with a quick round of rapid-fire crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
I'm up for it. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Just going to run some questions at you, Keone. No right or wrong way to do this. Just give us your honest answers, hot take style. if you like. Question one for you. I think we know what you'll say, but where would you say that you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum?
I would say multi-chain opportunist 100%.
Yep, I thought you might. Okay, well, what would you say, Keone, is your firmest conviction crypto opinion?
I think decentralization is really important, and it's exciting to see more people getting, crypto pilled and specifically decentralized pilled.
Nice. UBI as a potential fix for AI-induced automation, whether that's done by something like WorldCoin or something else entirely. Do you think that's a good idea, something we should be experimenting with?
I do think it is going to be very important. So I do think we should experiment with it right now. I think that if we get to the point where robots are extremely powerful and doing most of the work, then it will end up freeing us humans up to, have more leisure time and maybe some time doing higher level thinking. So, but in that environment, it's definitely very important that, with all these productivity gains, that it's shared with everyone. I do also have a hot take that I think that if and when there is full artificial intelligence that is kind of like owning everything and ruling over everything, that they'll keep us as pets and they will value us for the fact that we have creativity that they don't have. They'll be striving to try to produce like human level creativity, like a creative thought that they could not have thought of. Um, and that's why they'll treasure us and feed us and give us things that we want.
I like that. That's a good hot take. That would be a good subject for like a sci-fi short story or the basis of a sci-fi film. AI keeping humans as pets because we're creative. I like it. All right. Keone, Bill Gates famously said that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. As a blockchain builder, you'll be only too familiar with that kind of thesis. Nonetheless, cast your mind 10 years forward, open finance, DeFi, Monad, anything you like. What does it look like in 10 years' time?
Well, I was just thinking about whether I agreed with that because I think it's, even at 10 years, like I think, I worked in a previous industry for 10 years and I learned a lot, but um, I think it would be nice to have learned more than I did in those 10 years. So that's just my worry a little bit is that maybe we're overestimating on both 2 and 10. Um, but yeah, I think 10 years from now, we should have most of the infrastructure problems solved at that point, like scalability, um, performant applications, like real applications that people are really, that deliver value to users. So the question will really be like what kinds of new things that we could not have even imagined would be things. To what extent will that happen? Like I think of NFTs honestly as a kind of unexpected phenomenon. Like the fact that people would attribute so much value to just ownership of digital art. So I think there's probably other things that end up having product market fit with the broader population, and I can't wait to see what those are.
Yeah, very nice. Keone, William Gibson said that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. Can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people aren't aware of it?
No, I actually cannot. That's my hot take. So I feel like, if you'd asked me a couple of years ago, I would have said that neural nets are really powerful and they're the future, but no one knows about them. But now everyone knows about LLMs and everyone's using ChatGPT to write their homework. And so no, I don't. I think if anything, like there's sort of a lot of exposure to future tech that isn't really fully calibrated and at full potential right now. But people are more aware of it than they almost should be.
Yeah, I think that is probably true. All right, let's start to finish this off, Keone. If we zoom out, let's get weird for a second. If we zoom out, what do you see as the long-term future for the human race? Do you see dystopia or utopia?
I personally see dystopia, unfortunately.
You want to expand on that or not really?
Well, I just think that climate change is a big problem that we're very clearly not paying any attention to.
Yeah.
And, that alone could just wipe us out. And then there's just a lot of other cases where we end up being very selfish. And yeah, I think the pace of improvement in that regard is much, be very disappointing to our ancestors.
Yeah. All right. Cheery stuff, happy stuff here at the end of the show. It brings us, though, to our final question, Keone, which is what is your favorite science fiction book, film, or TV show?
I really like Foundation because the premise of the book is that there's one person who can just think really, really hard and predict everything that's going to happen and then put in place um, sort of like holograms to pop up at strategic points in time to help guide his followers who end up becoming kind of a cult, but to help steer things in the right direction and make sure that the universe doesn't destroy itself. Um, and it's kind of appealing because it tickles the questions about predestination and free will and the idea that maybe you could think about something really hard and then logic it out and then do the right thing and do the right thing for the rest of the world.
Yeah, very nice. And very much mostly a utopian vision foundation. So, yeah. Well, that brings us nicely to the end of the show, really, Keone. It's been a lot of fun talking to you. Nothing else to say, really, except close it out. Again, tell people where they can find you on Twitter or wherever else you like to hang out. And again, if people want to follow along, potentially even get involved, find out what you're doing at Monad, what should they do?
Sure. I'm on Twitter at Keone HD. So it's Keone HD. And yeah, hit me up there, send me a DM there, and be happy to tell you more about what we're up to at Monad.
Awesome. Um, thank you very much for coming on the show. All the best and bye for now.
Yeah, same to you, Andy. Thanks. Take care.
All right, there you go. That was Keone from Monad. Very interesting guy. Monad actually looks pretty slick. So, as I said, be fascinating to see how they roll that out. Monad.xyz link is in the show notes. Thank you to Keone for coming on. That is the end of another show, team. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Please make sure you are subscribed to the Crypto Conversation in whatever podcast app you are using. But that is it for today. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin.